Too many leaders lead for validation, not impact, for what they can get out of it more than what they can give to it. Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm obsessed with how leaders grow and develop, and I too have insecure moments. We all do. Glad you're here with me now on the Sight Shift podcast so you can learn how to lead for impact, not validation. Welcome to the Sight Shift podcast. Glad you guys are here for our new series. I got my man Mark Stanifer in the house. Mark, good to see you, buddy. Glad
Chris,
you're here.
Likewise.
Yeah, so we're going to have some fun. So we want to walk through something that's been absolutely revolutionary for me in over 2 decades of leadership development. And we think it will be for you. If you lead a large team and you've made a few great decisions on hiring world-class leaders, but you've made a few bad decisions, we want to help you figure out why those bad decisions occurred, what it looks like to really develop your ability to understand how to find great leaders. Do leaders need more leaders?
Leaders need leaders.
If you have a vision that you care about, you know that you need leaders to see that vision occur. And so what we want to do is give you a distinction that we're going to spend a little bit of time introducing it before we get into the negatives and positives. But it's a shift in leadership awareness or development that most people have never had pointed out to them. So if you talk to most people and you're asking them about how they think about their leadership team, they're going to often classify them in different ways. And they're going to think some are better than others based on one word, and that word would be temperament. So they're evaluating great leaders based on how they show up. Do they show up extroverted, gregarious, ability to communicate quick and on their feet, or not? And we're going to get into why that's a problem. Mark, in your corporate experience and your leadership experience, have you ever seen people judge people based on some of these characteristics and miss real leadership?
Have I ever seen that happen? How many times?
Yeah.
Can I count the ways? I mean, we certainly have a fascination in fact in what's
I think you're going for infatuation.
Infatuation. Thank you.
I got you. That's why this is a tag team effort.
Whew, that was hard. We have an infatuation with charisma and extroversion and an excellence with words and excitement and all of that. And that's a gift that can be used well, but it is not an exclusive trait of effective leaders. It's a temperamental trait, perhaps, but it's not an exclusive trait.
I mean, in a weird way, it is funny that the point you were making was happening,
Right?
right? While you were making the
exactly.
point. Because here's the guy in my world who could come in and be like, hey, the sky's green now. And I'd be like, all right, I believe you. I trust you because of his leadership, character, and capacity and growing capability. And so what you need to understand is what most leaders are doing is building their teams out of their insecurities. They want to see things mirrored and matched in their temperament. It might be that they want to see things exactly reflected back how they want to see them. So they're an excitable person who likes change and big ideas, and so they get a team full of people like that. It could also be that they're trying to build their team in regards of comforting insecurities they have. And so without awareness, they're building a temperamental team. Who wants a temperamental team? That sounds terrible. We're going to give you a way of thinking about this that's revolutionary. We don't want you to think about building leaders and building teams as a temperament, but as a template.
Before you go into that,
yeah,
and get into the details, just say a little bit more about hiring to comfort insecurity. I think it's clear hiring because we like the person because that person is a lot like me.
Yeah.
But just a quick example of hiring to comfort insecurity.
Yeah. So like I'll illustrate both. My wiring, I'm excited about the future, so I could hire people that just get excited about the future. And then we're missing the present reality and how to turn those obstacles to opportunities. The other side of that is I want to feel like I'm accomplishing great things. And so I'm going to hire out of my insecurities. In this regard, I could hire yes people who don't have a fully developed sense of self. Maybe they have identity fears that keep them in a way being in a mode of a little bit of a wallflower. I don't want to speak up and sound wrong. And so then a person hires those people so that they can go home at the end of the day and feel like, well, I'm a great leader. I'm giving out all these great ideas, and clearly they all agree with them because they enthusiastically nod their heads. Yeah. And so I'm trying to comfort an insecurity I have which is I don't want to deal with reality. I want to rush to the future. And these people are all complicit in that.
Yeah.
And
Good.
everyone that's ever been on a team at some level, unless that leader was very aware, they've seen this play out.
Yeah.
Some of you are like, Chris, stop talking right now because this is painful to think
A little
about.
too close.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we want to do is contrast a temperament model based of leadership development versus a template model. And if you can grasp this, then you're going to start to have a different vision, right? You're going to start to see differently. You can only see leaders now at the edge of your consciousness. And we're going to expand how you approach this so that you see leaders differently. So we're going to run through 8 negatives that happen when you have a temperament based model in leadership development. So you're evaluating leaders based on this and you're developing leaders based on this.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about evaluating. We can talk about developing real quick. You know, if somebody's more extroverted, then they're not going to read the agenda before the meeting.
Right.
But you should have a published agendas before the meeting because those more introverted, they are going to read it.
Correct.
Right? And they're going to give better thoughts. So a poor coaching would happen by an extroverted leader that would say, well, I don't read the agenda before. You don't need to send the agenda out before. Right? And then you're now developing people based on your temperament.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation, and Mark didn't know I was going to ask this, where you were mislabeled, misunderstood, or misjudged in regards to temperament?
I think my temperament generally is to collect information and to process and be a little slower to speak and to express an opinion, which can it, like for things that are moving fast can the opportunity for me to share what I'm thinking can be completely blown past. And I look like I don't have anything to say or can't contribute anything in that scenario. That's just one example that comes to mind.
That's powerful. I mean, let any leader out there watching this just be aware, you can't evaluate people temperamentally. It has to be based on the template. And if you evaluate them temperamentally, you're going to not fully understand Mark's contribution, and you're not going to know how to structurally work to slow things down where you need to. And if you do this right, communication cascades through the organization at different levels. It's like it's moving through the different teams so that he and I can talk about it. He has the time he needs with it. Then we can talk about it with the team at large. Then it can go to the organization. Mm-hmm. And by saying the time that he needs with it, that's not a negative. That's a positive, because the way that he's looking at it, he's going to catch things that I would miss. And the organization is structured such that the team should be bringing strengths where the other one's weak. That seems obvious, but so many teams don't build even their communication systems to adopt for that. You need to be introducing things in a meeting before they have to be discussed and then before they're decided on, so that there's a rhythm that we can adjust. And of course, things come up and you got to move quick on them. But more often than not, we're just leading the organization reactively because we don't have a proactive system that allows a templated model versus temperamental model really win out in the organization. And this is why most cultures are overshaped by a few exaggerated extroverted provers, because they're quick on their feet and they're gregarious about their ideas, and nobody else is getting to shape and make it better.
The agenda example is a good one. I remember being a part of an organization and asking for agendas ahead of time, because there was a lot of meat on the agenda every time we met, and we were asked to or expected to contribute. And I knew my style, and I asked for them ahead of time. We never got them.
Wild.
And I think part of the reason, maybe not all the reason, but part of the reason is the person leading those meetings wanted to control and to perhaps prove in those moments, or wanted to avoid the confrontation in the meeting, and knew that if we get it on the agenda, get it talked about, and move on within the meeting, then they could have their way, rather than prep ahead of time to come in with some, for me, it would be more coherent thoughts or more processed thoughts. anyway.
That's awesome.
But yeah, like there's a real example of
Yeah.
where I asked, can we get it ahead of time? And the leader was not really secure enough to let that happen.
Yeah. And so the temperamental model favors that person. And they may be not wanting to give up power. We see that.
Right.
Sometimes it's, this was me in my more immature days. Well, I'll know it when I get there, which really was winging it, right? Rather than being prepared. It's like, well, when I get to that meeting, then I'll know the agenda versus no, we got to get ahead of this. So I love that. This is coloring this in. So we're going to run through these at a high level, kind of quick and powerful. Grab a hold of this. Number one reason why you don't want to be in a temperamental model of evaluating and developing leaders is subjectivity and bias, which we've already talked about. So, just know that in the West, there's such a bias towards extroversion that it is the loudest person that's having the most influence. And oftentimes, that person, well understood, is bringing an incomplete idea that can spark innovation, but it's the quiet people that are going to complete that idea and keep it from being damaging. Right? Half-baked. You never see me come up with a half-baked idea. If only everyone knew. The second piece that's a negative to evaluating and developing leaders temperamentally is you're going to have inconsistency. What's the standard? Right? The standard gets different for everybody. And so then that person gets a bonus, that person gets a promotion plan, but this person doesn't. Well, why? Well, you're not doing blank enough. And it's a comparison point to a temperament evaluation. Over and over, we see this in companies. We'll ask people. I just asked somebody in a coaching session now, working with their organization, looking at their sales team. Tell me about your A players. Most leaders will describe it immediately, a temperamental A player that they affiliate with based on their insecurities. Now, to this guy's credit, he named each person and their unique strengths. So he was looking at it more from a template. Right. So we see inconsistency. Third reason that you don't want to be in a temperamental model is overemphasis on personality. So for those of you who don't know, Mark had extensive corporate experience. How many times did you see in situations where the personality won out over the quality of the thinking and the idea?
Yeah, for sure. All the time. Right. So similar to subjectivity and bias, but it was the extroverted leaders, the quick on their feet leaders, the leaders that had a ready answer for any question, that were just gifted to be able to think faster or to act and make decisions faster, or to just jump in and cut anybody else off, right? Those were the ones that ultimately got rewarded. They were seen as having results, and so the quote unquote the results were rewarded. Not always results, and the how you got the results wasn't always considered as well. But yeah, like this one resonates with me, that the personality, because someone like me, who's wired to be a little quieter, more reserved, without awareness and without recognition of my own strengths, your own strengths, can conclude that, leadership isn't what I am. Leadership is what they are, because they have the extroversion, they have the charm, they have fill in the blank personality characteristic. I just don't have that. So in some respects, it can also let me off the hook, because I can be a hider, right? So if it's personality based, then those that are hiders or those that are quiet, they can hide. And moving, we'll get into the template, but moving away from the temperament based can call those hiders like me out to contribution and not let me just sit on the sidelines because I'm not the loudest voice in the room.
Thank you. I mean, we hope you even grasp this in fundamental ways. An organization cannot thrive without the people that are bringing out quick ideas. They're powerful, but they're incomplete, and without others who are helping shape them and finish them and make them better. This is why, if you have a temperamental model for evaluating and developing leaders, you're going to hit this fourth negative, limited scalability. So you're constantly hitting this false ceiling just from a percentage based standpoint.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the percentages, the number of people, whatever, measurement tools you might use, it tends to be, because I've taken so many of them, where my profile might be like a natural leader. It'll say things like that.
Yeah.
And then the reason I think that's so terrible is because then it's putting a percentage to it. Like only this percentage of the population has this. And now what it's doing is saying, well, other people can't be,
Right.
right? And so you're born a leader or you're not,
Right.
which is awful. So you can't scale. And so then your organization is always going to be limited by how many of a certain type you can find,
Yeah.
which sets us up to fail.
Yeah.
Next one, fifth one, risk of stereotyping. We've hit an angle on this that I think is really powerful already, but there's another side to it. We've talked about this risk of stereotyping that says we've got to get Mark's wisdom and voice out more. He's his own person, strong enough to do that, but the system should allow him to have the time he needs to complete the thinking to protect us from the harm I'll take us into, if we could say it that way. But there's another risk of stereotyping too, and the answer isn't an us versus them, because this is how people approach cultural change. They go to the other extreme and they go, well, people that lead like I do are terrible, right? So now you have, you see this in the way people try to bring in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like this, it's an all or nothing us versus them battle. I need to still be present. There's a risk of stereotyping that like, there goes Chris again, right?
Right.
But I have to be able to show up in my best self, and Mark has to show up in his best self. So we can't stereotype either way.
Yeah, and yet stereotypes can also be humorous, and we can laugh at our own tendencies and stereotypes too.
I love that.
I'm just thinking of all the times I've said about someone, well, now they're just chasing the next shiny object. But if they aren't chasing the new things and the innovating, then there will never be incomplete ideas for me to help improve and to work on. Because people like you have ideas for days, and I have days for idea.
Love it. Love it. That's a great turn of phrase. That's exactly what we're saying. Like, this is how you get the complete idea to execution that then can affect change, grow your company, whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So speaking of change, next reason, if you have a temperamental model, you're going to be resistant to change. What's that bring to mind for you?
Yeah, it brings to mind like, well, I'm off the hook. I'm wired up this way, and maybe that's for leadership good or for leadership not good, but I don't have to change. I am who I am. This is the way that I am, and you just got to deal with it. I know that phrase drives you nuts.
Man, it's like I can see myself as a young leader being insecure and arrogant and just being like, well, that's who I am. People are going to have to deal with it. I'm going to turn things on a dime. I'm going to run in with a new idea every month. And that kind of wiring, which focuses on a temperament model of leadership, keeps things dysfunctional, because it has been absolutely life-changing for me to understand, and we eat our own steaks, measurement of how you show up in your work. So we have a tool that measures that. We're super passionate about it. You'll hear us talk about it a ton. Always more at SiteShift, SIGHTShift.com. And in our tool, and when we measure, we can see when a team is missing a component, that someone is originating an incomplete idea, someone is synthesizing it into the organization, someone is helping get this idea to a place that it's improving and operationalized, and then someone is helping make sure it's done. It's like trying to cook a chocolate chip cookie without any chocolate chips or flour, right? You're missing these key ingredients to see this move through. And everyone, when they only understand a temperamental model of leadership, is approaching things through their filter and viewpoint.
Yep.
And so they're resistant to change to become who they need to be to work very effectively in a team environment. And if they'll do that, then they're going to advance. But if not, they're going to have this seventh mistake that we see in a temperamental model of leadership, and that's a lack of clear metrics. Because let's face it, when you talk about financials, credit, debit, profit, loss, very clear. These are clear categories. We can say what's good and what's bad. No matter how much you want to do an adjusted EBITDA, there's still stuff there. Leadership hasn't had that, because a temperamental model of leadership doesn't allow a clear metric to say, Are they a leader who's actually developing other leaders?
Mm.
It's not something we can measure. And so people have given up on that when we're kind of coming with a radical idea to say you can measure it.
Yeah.
You know, what's that bring to mind for you?
Yeah, well, just some of these overlap, but like the consistency, the specificity, disconnecting from the DNA of your wiring and being able to put a process in place,
Yeah.
or connect to something that is measurable, that isn't just purely subjective. Oh, that person got results because they're the loudest, or they speak the fastest. No, it's like that all gets distilled down into the lowest common denominators, metrics, that don't have anything to do with personality or temperament or wiring. It has to do with results, and how you are getting those results are unique to you and matter. But there are results that can be measured in the form of these metrics.
How you get the results matter. I love it. Which brings up the last reason that I'm going to change the wording from our notes. Unnecessary conflict. Unnecessary conflict. If you have a temperamental model for evaluating and developing leaders, you're going to have unnecessary conflict because these styles are going to fight against each other as you prioritize one style over another. It's like you're in the Serengeti and you're saying, well, the way to lead is be a lion. And then you create these unnecessary drama points. I'll state this because we see it with teams all the time. If you can help everyone understand the insecurities they have in their leadership and their natural relationship to work, you will clear up all unnecessary conflict.
It's a bold statement.
It's huge, right? And I'll stand by it because some conflict's necessary, but it's the unnecessary conflict that's a waste of time and energy. And I don't know any healthy person that would say, I'd like more conflict.
Right.
But unhealthy people. So we want to talk about the positives now. If you can embrace not a temperamental model for leadership development and evaluation, but a template-based model. In other words, there is a standard we can hold ourselves to, we can measure to. And we'll share a little bit about that standard at the end. So we're going to run through these kind of quick. But if you embrace a template model of leadership, where you're going to evaluate and develop leaders according to a template, not a temperament, you're going to see these 8 or 10 advantages. One, there will be consistency and unity. Consistency and unity. You're not worried about getting a consistent experience for everyone to show up just the same in a meeting. You're getting a consistency in everyone bringing their best leadership. And so we're all rowing in the same direction. And just like you would look at a financial and you would say, we can be consistently aligned with, here's where we're at with the numbers. You can do the same with evaluating leaders if you have a template in place. 2, you're going to have clear expectations. Whoa. So what is expected of me in this organization? Oh, I'm expected to be a leader who develops other leaders. How do I do that? What's the template? How do I measure that? Now we can have a clear conversation around expectations because how much fuzziness exists around leadership development? Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that's clear. And how fair is it to evaluate somebody based on unclear expectations?
An immediate story comes to mind. It's not appropriate for the podcast here. The names will remain unnamed and innocent.
It's not Steve. It rhymes with Reeve. Just kidding. If I guessed on that, that was just a random wild guess.
Yeah, no, but like instantly, I've got the story in mind where there are expectations that are different. They're not clear, and it's creating a whole lot of angst.
Yeah,
a whole lot of angst to the point where something will change.
Yeah.
It will be the change the organization wants, or it will be the change the organization is not expecting because someone brings the change on them. But yeah, clear expectations.
Right on. Well, benefit 3 is scalability. So if you have a template-based model to evaluate and develop leaders, then you can scale it throughout the organization, from the mailroom to the boardroom. And what a lot of leaders are doing is saying, well, and we hear this all the time, well, the people in the mailroom aren't really leaders. Was that how you want to have them thinking and talking? I mean, I wouldn't want to put a ceiling on someone's mindset because we've seen people that have blown through the levels of the organization because they've learned how to show up to be that kind of leader.
Yeah.
versus, there's a local restaurant brand. It's an inspiring story where he was like, I showed up, I was the worst employee working in the back of the kitchen. And the next day I showed up and I was the best employee. And now it's this massive restaurant brand. Because even though his position didn't dictate it, he started carrying the mindset of a leader.
Yeah. And I think just to add a quick thought here, if you are based on a temperament approach, then you will see only certain people as leaders. A template approach sees everybody as a leader in their own way, and you have the opportunity to draw that out, and to your point, not put a cap on their or a ceiling on their capacity, but also not let them off the hook to be leaders of themselves and others, influential in their roles, whatever their role is.
Yeah.
It's a consistency and an accountability for everyone to behave as if they're leading, whether they're people leaders at the highest level or not.
That's awesome. I love it. Fourth benefit, template model, objective evaluation. Objective evaluation. When you're trying to walk leaders through a conversation around improvement, without awareness on this, you're going to coach them into the skills you've found most valuable, which may or may not be the skills that they need. Rare is the leader who intuitively, without intention, gets to a place that they can actually develop leaders for who they can become versus making them in their image.
Yeah.
So what a lot of leaders are doing is they think, well, I'm developing leaders. It's not an objective evaluation. They're just making them in their image.
Yep.
And if they get the lucky, pull of the cards that they grab some leaders on a team who are deficient in the things they're deficient in, then I'm not saying they didn't make a substantive contribution to them, but they got lucky or they drew that signal in versus being able to really objectively evaluate and give their leaders feedback and coach them. So we see that all the time.
Yep.
Thoughts on that one?
Now keep going.
Keep rolling. 5, structured development. Structured development. So imagine if, you're trying to build a house and you show up and you're going to help me build a house. And if you've ever gone through the house building process, you know how complex it can be. And you're going to help me build this house, and I give you some boards, and I say, start making the roof, right? Tons of people, as silly as this sounds, have been thrown into leadership positions. Yeah. They may have competency for the role, but they don't have competency for building and developing leaders. And so because of that, there's not a structured development process where you're showing up day one and they're saying, here's a saw and here's how to use it. Here's a hammer and here's how to use it. That's the whole thing, right? Some people have a great experience with a hammer and then everything's the nail. Mm-hmm. We're not thinking through how to walk them through a structured developmental process. So that's the 5th benefit. 6th benefit, if you'll embrace a template model of leadership, you'll get alignment with organizational goals. Alignment with organizational goals. What's that bring to mind for you, Mark?
Yeah, well, just helping somebody know where they fit and how they contribute. Again, moving away from temperament toward template. It doesn't matter how you're wired up. There is a place to contribute, and there's a fit for you. And when you can operate out of this template approach, you can align folks around the organizational goals. Here's what you are leading toward for contribution, and here's where you fit in the organization, regardless of your temperament or not.
That's awesome. And how many people are in a meeting with you or in your organization that would say, think about this, I don't really care to know where I fit in if I play an important part. Nobody of quality. If that's how they're thinking, you don't want them there.
Yeah.
But everybody of quality is thinking, does my part matter? How do I make a difference here? What's the contribution I make? And if you can spell that out and people understand how they fit in the cohesive picture of the organization, well, that's the mindset every leader of leaders wants people to develop. Then they're taking ownership.
That's right.
Right? They're walking in the parking lot going, I'm going to pick up this piece of trash. I don't have to wait for someone else to do it. Man, that gives me chills. I'm so glad you took us there. Yeah. 7, Seventh benefit for a template-based model of leadership: reduced bias and subjectivity. Reduced bias and subjectivity. We think about things in terms of bias, I think, in such a shallow way today. Those are all great starting points to the conversation, but they're terrible ending points to the conversation, because we're wanting to look at a team as a group of people who, even if they look different or look the same, key is they think differently. Mm-hmm. They approach their work roles differently. They have different worldviews. They approach the ways that they would tackle a task differently. I know we're getting into some dangerous waters with this. You either need to rescue me or take me further. Okay.
Well, it's broadening the understanding of what diversity really is.
Yeah.
And appreciating a deeper diversification and what that does to the team versus more the surface level diversity.
Yeah. And again, it's like, what happens for people that appreciate a template-based model of leadership? You can start the conversation in a healthy way, but you don't let it end there. You keep on going to the point that we have a diverse table of thinking. So huge. All right. Eighth benefit is it's easier to communicate and implement. It's easier to communicate and implement. If you ask somebody that you're interacting with, are you developing leaders? Who develop leaders? How are you evaluating your leaders? It gets so messy when it's temperamental. And if they use any good, clear ways of describing it, it's going to be the things that they value the most. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is elevate the conversation to this point that you can so powerfully interact with somebody, and even if it's not how you would approach it, you can see where their mindset breaks down or their skill set is deficient, so that you can help them be who they can be. And what we see is a lot of leaders come into a place that they really get suffocated by the lack of clear direction. Just tell me what you need me to grow in. Help me understand why I'm wrestling this the way that I am. That person, years from now, will go, that's the best boss I've ever worked for. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't view them through your filter or lens. Yep. Any thoughts on that?
No, I just echo that last comment for sure.
All right. Number 9. If you lead with a template-based model, which I've kind of set up a little bit already, you're focusing on mindset and skill development versus just external personality factors.
Correct.
And you think about any elite performer in any field that you value, and now take another elite performer in another field you value. I mean, the Olympics are on now. Maybe you think of an example from the Olympics. They can be completely different in temperament, even though the template of them being world class is similar.
Yeah.
Because they have the mindset.
Right.
What's that bring to mind for you?
They're just continuous development.
Yeah.
If
that's awesome.
If it's limited to your DNA and your wiring, there's no more work that needs to happen. But if it's disconnected and it's templatized or understood that everybody can grow in leading, then the onus is on you, it's on me, it's on you to continually develop.
I can't say it better. I love that. Why would you not want to continually develop? I don't want to phone it in. I don't want to coast. Now, there's some days I wouldn't mind some coasting. But if we're going to give so much of ourselves to our mission, why not get better through it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, last benefit, and then we're going to give you a way to understand a template model of leadership. 10th benefit is flexibility for customization. Flexibility for customization. And I think we've hinted at this, but just to directly state it, if you're going to be the kind of leader who evaluates and builds other leaders based on a template model, then you get to see exactly what they need when they need it versus guessing at it. You start to see, I mean, if you were world class in something and you were trying to train somebody else in that skill, whatever that skill is, let's say you're the world's best at gingerbread house, cookie building, whatever. It's not even Christmas time, right? I don't know where that came from. But if you were the world's best at it and you saw somebody doing something in the wrong order, you would be able to come beside them and say, what if you did this here and this here? And that order that they were approaching it in was just unique to whatever the nature and nurture they've been through. And we've all had a different combination of nature and nurture. Yeah. Any thoughts on that one?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we hope in some way we've captured your imagination, that you would go, I don't want to build, I don't want to evaluate, I don't want to try to develop leaders on a temperamental model. I want to evaluate and build leaders based on a template model. Is there a template that exists? And we would say there is. Like, we're committed to this idea that when a leader is secure in who they are clear in what they do, and they attract and build healthy culture, community, and teams. Mm-hmm. There is a template to every person for how they can lead at their absolute best. And so what we're wanting to do is start at the root level of who someone is, so that they can figure out the fixed ways they show up at work and the flexible ways their mindset can develop and grow. And we've put together a tool for that. The URL for it is taketheifq.com. Take the IFQ, identityfearquotient.com. And you can find a template model understanding of leadership and where you are at in that model. So you'll know where you need to work. Yep. Where you need to not try to change yourself because it's the fixed ways you work, and where you can shift everything because it's the flexible ways. So we hope you go there and check it out.
It's a great resource.
Any final words before we go?
No, it's a good chat. Lots of good information to digest.
So wherever you find yourself, if you're looking at a leader right now and going, man, do they really have what it takes? Are they a great leader? Make sure you're evaluating them from a healthy, solid template, wherever you find the one that you resonate with most, and not just according to temperament. That's the way to do it. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this episode. There's always more for you at SightShift, SIGHT, shift.com, to be the leader you were meant to be.